What's happening, y'all? Corey Buschlen from Fantasy Stock Exchange coming at you to break down the Week 10 DFS slate. As I do every Monday, I go over the DraftKings Millionaire Maker winning lineup, as well as the FanDuel Sunday Million winning lineup. Talk about where they stacked, where they spent up, what chalk they ate, how they got contrarian in certain areas, as well as go over my own lineups, talk about what I can learn from the people that won the Millionaire contest on those two respective sites. So if you guys do want some of my GPP advice, I do write a FanDuel and DraftKings column for the Draft Sharks website. You can check that out. If you enjoy this video at any point, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Now let's get right into this. So we're going to start with the DraftKings Millionaire Maker winning lineup right now. You guys can see that this guy went with a Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs stack. Didn't choose to run it back with anybody. Didn't play Elijah Moore, Corey Davis on the other side of things. But what I really like what this guy did, and I think is the really big takeaway from this lineup, is that when there's a chalky running back, when there's a free space running back like Dearness Johnson, like this guy played, right? Near 50% ownership in the Millionaire Maker contest. If that guy hits, you need some kind of differentiation. And what I really like doing and what this guy did was he got differentiation in that exact game, right? Because he played Dearness Johnson on the Cleveland side. And then on the other side of the ball with New England, he played Hunter Henry at sub 5% ownership and Ramondre Stevenson surprisingly at sub 5% ownership. I'm kind of surprised he was that low owned in a contest where everybody knew Damian Harris was out. That was kind of surprising to me. But the fact that he stacked those two Patriots, of course, they scored 4 touchdowns. So that definitely helps. And also Dearness Johnson gave him some differentiation to people who just played Dearness Johnson alone. In that game, of course, New England scoring 45 points got him some exposure to that game in general. Going into that game, obviously the process was to stack up against Dearness Johnson, and Dearness Johnson would get there in the passing game, which is exactly what happened with the 7 receptions that he saw. So really like what this guy did. Of course, he did play a one-off Keenan Allen, a one-off CeeDee Lamb at about 10%, who was featured in my article as a guy that I really liked, as well as the Eagles defense, who I also talked about in my article. So overall, great lineup construction by this guy. Process was sound. Everything was there. Congrats to him on the winning lineup for the Millionaire Maker, and he's a very rich man now. So we're moving on to myself, who's not a very rich man after this week. I actually did take it on the chin this week in DFS. I did a lot better last week than I did this week. But looking at what I did, I also did the Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen stack. Didn't choose to run it back with anybody, just like the Millionaire Maker did. But I made a couple other questionable decisions in other areas. Now, a couple decisions that I did make that I really liked was pretty much everything that I did at 1 p.m. worked. Ezekiel Elliott, sub 10%. If you told me he wasn't going to get more than 10% ownership, I would have played him in every single one of my lineups. But according to ownership projections, he was projected to be the highest owned running back on the slate. Thought he was going to be about 20% owned. That wasn't the case. People chose to spend up either really high on Najee Harris, guys like that, or they went low on guys like Dearness Johnson, who you guys can see in this smaller field contest, about 2,000 people had a 61% ownership share. So the fact that I was able to get a cheaper, less owned running back in Ezekiel Elliott to help offset that, that definitely helped me out. My biggest, complaint about this lineup was that I should have late swapped. I had Mike Williams in there as well as DK Metcalf and the Seahawks defense. And my 1 o'clock stuff hit, right? I had Josh Allen, I had Diggs, Zeke, Dearness Johnson, James Washington, who was 3,500 on DraftKings, and he scored a touchdown, so I count that as a hit. And then Dan Arnold, also 3,500, was able to get there on receptions and a 2-point conversion. That stuff was all well and good at 1 p.m. Going into the 4 p.m. slate, I was like, should I swap Mike Williams? Because I knew Mike Williams would be about 20% owned, because pretty much every DFS content creator out there was gassing up Mike Williams this week as a great play, including myself. I thought he was a good play this week. But if he didn't get there, I wanted some differentiation from that, and I should have late swapped him out for Keenan Allen or somebody around that price range. DK Metcalf was a guy that I really liked, though, and the Seahawks defense. So I was okay leaving those guys in, and I knew DK Metcalf was going to be about 10% owned as well. So overall, 4 p.m., the process was there, but I probably should have swapped out Mike Williams for a better play, a little bit less of a chalky play, because I did eat some chalk relatively. I didn't think Dan Arnold would be 22% owned, also 61% on Dearness Johnson. So that lineup construction basically it resulted in a min cash for me, but it could have been a lot better if I would have made a better decision at 4 p.m. Moving on to the next lineup that I did on DraftKings, and this one was not a min cash. I actually fell out of the money in this one. And my biggest problem, obviously, you guys know I was very high on Tom Brady this week. Tom Brady going up against Washington, I thought they were going to have a big game in store for them. I went with Tom Brady and Mike Evans. Mike Evans, of course, I knew was going to be popular. Tom Brady, I knew was going to be popular. And I run it back with Ricky Seals-Jones, which definitely sandbagged my whole lineup, obviously, because that stack did not hit. only combined for like 45 points or whatever. I did get there, and I really like what I did at running back. So this is one of my big takeaways from this week and from these lineups is when you have pass catching running backs like Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Swift, anybody who's heavily involved in the passing game, you can pretty much throw matchups out the window because with DeAndre Swift, with Christian McCaffrey, with Austin Eckler, with Alvin Kamara, with some of these guys that may have a tough matchup on the ground, which the Cardinals defense and the Steelers defense were both good run defenses. They were able to get there through the passing game and as well as some scoring opportunities as well. And DeAndre Swift could have had a monster game if it wasn't for his two backups coming in for about 10 combined snaps and stealing away the touches and the touchdowns from DeAndre Swift in key areas. So overall, I really like what I did with my running backs in this lineup. I just missed on a couple of my wide receiver picks, of course. Did hit on James Washington at his price as well. Mark Ingram and Mike Evans were pretty chalky. I knew that was going to happen, so I was able to differentiate in other areas. I think this lineup was well constructed. I correlated the Swift with the Lions defense. Everything was set up. I just made a couple bad picks here and there, and mainly my stack was the problem. So if I would have played Josh Allen and Diggs with a different run back or something like that, or I just played a different one-off tight end instead of Ricky Seals-Jones, this lineup would have been a lot better. Had a lot of potential, but unfortunately did not get there. Moving on to FanDuel and the FanDuel Sunday Million contest. Again, another really good lineup construction from what I can see. Basically, Allen and Diggs, again, of course, they were the highest scoring stack of the week. Just a skinny stack between those two guys. But this guy actually did run it back on the other side, unlike the DraftKings Millionaire Maker winner. He ran it back with Elijah Moore. So yet another Millionaire Maker lineup where we're not seeing these onslaught stacks win. And that's a big takeaway of mine. A lot of people are, well adjusted to the idea that, if I'm going to stack Tom Brady, I should stack him Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and run it back with Terry McLaurin, or like two pass catching weapons, a quarterback, and then a run back on the other side. But we've seen these skinny stacks, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Elijah Moore run back be a lot more effective, these 2-for-1s. And that's a big takeaway for me building lineups going forward, especially in these bigger contests. So that is definitely interesting to see. And again, Ramondre Stevenson at 3%. I would have expected Ramondre Stevenson to be 10% at least. And it's pretty wild to me that he was only 3%. And of course, he did kind of mini correlate Ramondre Stevenson and Hunter Henry as the two major touchdown scorers in that game. Again, 4 combined touchdowns between those guys. James Robinson at 16.4 fantasy points, 0.8% drafted. Also a phenomenal pick. Again, another guy that in the Indianapolis matchup was supposed to be a very tough run defense that he was going up against. And we knew that going in, but he was able to get there on the touchdown on the back of receiving work as well. So James Robinson, another example of when you have a guy that's getting that much volume, sometimes you can just throw out matchups out the window. And Christian McCaffrey, again, in this lineup as well, also proved that. Plus, Devontae Smith as a one-off for the Eagles, and the Cowboys defense also as a one-off. So great job to that guy. Congrats on the Millionaire Maker winner. Again, another lineup that I didn't do too well in terms of my Sunday Million lineup. I usually throw 1 or 2 of these out a week. And what I basically did was like a 0 RB for those of you guys that play best ball. I went with 2 really cheap running backs. I expected to be highly owned. Brandon Bolden only came in at 2.2% drafted. Dearness Johnson, of course, 44% drafted in this contest. I went with those 2 running backs to allow me to free up salary and go heavy at wide receiver, heavy at tight end, pay up for a defense. So I went with Tom Brady, Mike Evans, with Terry McLaurin on the way back, just like the 2-for-1 that won the Sunday Million, but I wasn't able to pick very well in the other areas, right? I think the process was sound on some of these guys. DJ Moore was a stud receiver. The team scored a lot of points. And he has a lot of usage in this offense. They just didn't get there through the passing game, got there through the running game and Christian McCaffrey, as well as on defense. Kyle Pitts, again, another dud from him. Stephon Diggs was a good pick in this lineup, but overall just kind of picked wrong in this one. I think the process was sound for the most part, but I probably should have correlated a little bit more. Game selection was not exactly ideal, and the Brady stack obviously let me down there. So if you guys did enjoy this video, as always, like, comment, subscribe. Check out my GPP picks articles for FanDuel and for DraftKings. Those are live every Saturday morning or so. And also just make sure to check out the Draft Sharks website as well, just to find out all the other great content, great premium analysis going on over there. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.